that. And we probably did some of this, right? Neurons versus neuroglial cells. Did we talk about the differences on those?
No, we were up at neural.
So we made it further than that?
We did all the axon part. And
Did we?
then synapse.
Ah, you're right. Okay. So synapse.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we're there, right? So we left off here. Yeah. Okay. So this is right. All right. So, all right. So here we go. We'll figure this whole thing out with like the base level, but for sure we're gonna have that practical next Monday, Tuesday, and we'll figure out the other practical, and we'll see what that's day before. Just want to dump that on the final exam or something. I don't know. It's like up to you. So. Okay. So moving on, I guess. There. Really off of this slide, there's only one thing I wanted you to know about, and that was a synapse. And really, we talked about a synapse when we talked about the neuromuscular junction. So by definition, a synapse is where a neuron communicates with like another neuron or some other cell type. So as long as you know that, we're golden. So where one neuron communicates with another neuron. Here's the thing, you guys remember talking about like in the very beginning, like what's included with the nervous system? We had brain, spinal cord, nerves, ganglia, and receptors, things like that. So here's going to be the deal. A lot of times you need more than one neuron to make the pathway from like your brain to your heart, from your brain to your liver, whatever. That's a pathway. And so we're going to find that here's neuron number one. And we said neuron number one talks to neuron number two, right? So where one communicates with another one sort of thing here. I'm going to look at it this way, here. Okay. So where those two communicate, nerve number one talks to nerve number two, this little area right there, yeah, that's called a ganglia. Okay, so that was one of our definitions from like the very first thing, ganglia. So it's a point of communication, or it's an area where those two cells can communicate with each other. We'll see more of those a bit later on too. So nerve one, nerve two. Okay, here's the deal. We're going to call these neurons. What should I call it before the ganglia? Pre. What should I call it after the ganglia? Post. Okay, so we're going to talk about pre-ganglionic neurons and post-ganglionic neurons a little bit later on in another chapter. But right now, just to have that idea, this would be like a pathway, point A to point B through here. So again, that's a synapse where one talks to the other one. Just give you some definitions first. Okay, don't worry about the rest. We don't care about that stuff, right? Varicosity, we already did end bulbs from before, so I think we're pretty good in that one. Don't care, don't care. Here we go. We're going to take a look at some neurons here. And we have a few types, and they're really easy to do. We're going to do the same thing up in lab, too. So let me show you the three real quick here. They make really good sense. So my neurons can look different. Okay, so imagine that whole thing. Here I'm going to have three neurons. And these are the cell bodies of my neurons. There's neuron number one, neuron number two, and neuron number three, right here. If I have multiple things pulling off of the cell body, so the cell body is where the number one is, that's the cell body through there. I have multiple things pulling off the cell body, I call it a multipolar neuron. So there's multiple things pulling off. If I only have two things pulling off of the cell body of my neuron, I call it a bipolar. And if I only have one thing pulling off of the cell body, I call it a unipolar neuron. So is that pretty easy for you? Yeah, that's going to be on your lab practical too. There's a picture of a neuron, and you just call it unipolar, bipolar, multipolar. So it's like that easy. So I'm saying this last practical number 4 is like really easy. Okay, so they sort of look just like that. Unipolar, bipolar, multipolar. Well, they're found in different parts of the body. That's the key. My multipolar neurons, they're found in CNS, right? So it's found in your brain and your spinal cord is where I find this guy over here, CNS. And it's a motor neuron. We're talking about sensory in, motor commands out. These are motor neurons. I'll put that down there for you too. So motor neuron. Okay, bipolar. These are pretty rare. So we don't have a lot of these. We'll put down here that they're rare. And these are found in more like your special senses. Things are like vision and things of that nature. Let's put down rare and special senses. I have slides for all this stuff too. I'll just like set them up on the board for you real quick. Now my unipolar, these are found in my PNS. Yeah, PNS. And these are sensory neurons. So we have sensory in, motor out. So sensory and motor. So that's probably like good stuff to know. Like, what do they look like? Where are they found? What do they do? Sort of thing. So we'll have a few questions about that in the next test, right? And at some point, we have the example 4 on the final. All right, so we'll run through, and again, we can see my multipolar neuron. At some point, we're going to run through your exam too, right? Maybe like tomorrow, maybe. Would that be okay? I want to try to get like a lot of 12 done today. So, anyway, so here's my little neuron, multipolar neuron. It has 2 or more dendrites, a little branch over here, and an axon. Most commonly found in the CNS, so it's found in your brain and spinal cord, and typically it's a motor neuron for us. Here's my other one. It's a bipolar neuron. It only has 2 things pulling off the cell body, so it's bi over there. It's rare, except for your special senses. Just put down like vision, would be perfect for that one. And what's my third type of neuron? It's a unipolar. So if you look real close, you can see that there's only one little piece pulling off the cell body, and then the axon connects that as well. So one found in the sensory neurons of the PNS. So peripheral nervous system, that would be like regular named nerves, whether it's a, I don't know, like your sciatic nerve, where it's going to be for you, and it's a sensory neuron. Pretty good? Easy, right? Cut and dry, not bad. Okay, so we have those types of neurons. Okay, so here's my neurons and neuroglial cells. You might remember from lab, we talked about nerve tissue, and what was the function of nerve tissue? Send signals, right? That's the whole key. Nerve tissue sends signals. Through there. Am I going too fast? Or like really fast? Are you okay? Okay. So your nerve tissue sends signals. Well, those signals are sent along a neuron. Okay, so I send my little signals to like my little neuromuscular junction thing, whatever. So that's the key, that my neurons send signals. Now the neuroglial cells, it's another type of cell found in nerve tissue, but they don't send signals. They're like helper cells, if you will, for that tissue. And they have names to them. Some are found in the PNS, others are found in the CNS, over here. And so they have crazy names like astrocytes. And we have microglial cells. And we have yada yada, there's like 4 of them we're going to do. And over here on the PNS, we have things like your Schwann cell, and satellite cells, and things like that. So these are cells that do not send signals. They can't send signals. Only the neurons can send signals. That's a good thing to know. So neurons versus neuroglial cells. Okay, so let's do the neuron thingy here first. So you're good. In a second. Yes. So neuroglial cells says they do what? They take up a pretty good volume of the nerve tissue for us. They're a little bit smaller than neurons. There's the key. They're not excitable, which means they can't send signals. That's probably definitely a test question for you. So they're not excitable, therefore they cannot send signals. They can't send or create those little action potentials for us. But here's the thing. They can repair themselves. So they can multiply and divide, which is unusual because your neurons can't do that, right? So if you kill a neuron, it's done. You cut a nerve, it's done, something, right? Brain damage, can't fix it. Spinal cord damage, can't fix it. So, but these you can do the repair, you can multiply, you can divide, all crazy stuff. So that's some of the key differences between the 2 types of cells. Okay, so we're going to go through and show you the differences between the types of cells, found in those tissues, what they do specifically. We're going to highlight just a few things here. I'll put like a big list over here for you too. And we're going to do the cells of the CNS first. Over there. So, now my astrocyte, looks like this little guy right over here. Here's my astrocyte, crazy looking little cell. Really I want you to know about this guy is that it maintains this blood-brain barrier. So write down BBB, blood-brain barrier sort of thing. I'll put it over here, yeah. So really, what do you think that is? A blood-brain barrier. It's a barrier between your bloodstream and your brain, right? So it's just that. Because again, your brain is very sterile, right? Nothing nasty inside there, cerebral spinal fluid circulating around, very, very, very sterile. Otherwise, you'd have all sorts of like bacterial and viral infections, whatever, so it's pretty nasty if you do get those. But anyways, so it's very isolated, very sterile environment for us. So we're going to go with the astrocytes, maintain the blood-brain barrier. They sort of monitor and regulate the environment, so that's their job. So astrocyte, blood-brain barrier. very good to go. Good? All right, just like describing what those cells do. Next up, an oligodendrocyte. What the heck is that thing? It's crazy, right? Yeah, I know. Oligodendrocytes. Holy cow. Write down they make the myelin sheath. That's the key. Myelin sheath. Okay. So I'll show you what the myelin sheath is. Have you guys seen like a piece of wire? It's like a piece of wire laying around the house or out whatever somewhere. So you have like a chunk of wire. And usually it has like a color, right? White, black, red, green, whatever color it's going to be for you, like an extension cord, orange, whatever. Okay. So that covering, that orange covering or green covering or white or red, whatever it could be, it covers the copper wire or aluminum wire that's in there, right? So here's like one little copper wire hanging out. That way you don't get shocked, right? The insulation going around it. Okay, so the myelin sheath is that insulation, if you will. It's the covering around the copper wire so you don't get electrocuted. Your neurons have the same thing. So here's my little axon, and I can have this insulation on the axon so it doesn't short out with other neurons and things like that, if you will. And really what that insulation does, it increases the speed, or it actually makes it faster to send a signal along the neuron forming. So we're going to talk about that myelin sheath here in just a minute. So just know that it's a covering or insulation around the axon of my neuron. So it says here produces the myelin sheath, it covers the axons, a protective membrane wrapping around the axon. We're going to also find that I have, it's not really continuous, but I have like a little space like here and here and here. So it's not like a solid covering, but it's pretty darn close to it. And those are called internodes. So we're going to talk about this thing known as the node of Ranvier, which are these little internodes. We'll do that a little bit later too, like coming up real fast. Okay. Ta-da. Here's the myelin sheath. If you look at it real close, you can see